Hello everyone, it's March 3rd, 2020. It's Tuesday. It's Harp Tuesday. Welcome to this week's edition. And right at the moment I'm in the middle of putting the finishing touches on a new music video I'm quite excited about. And I'm going to be doing a Harp Tuesday episode about that piece. And it's quite an advanced piece, and so I thought this week what I would do is look at a piece that I think anyone can play. And this is my slimmed down arrangement of one of the chorales from Bach's St. Matthew's Passion. So number 15, and the English translation is Recognize Me, My Guardian. The music is actually, according to Wikipedia, written by a German composer called Hans Leo Hassler, who was a little bit earlier than Bach, died in 1612. And it was a secular piece, then got used as a church piece, and then Bach took this with original words by his collaborator, and again, part of this St. Matthew's Passion. So I say it's by Bach, but the tune is not Bach's, but the harmonization is his. It's a beautiful piece. And what I've done here is I've really slimmed it down to try to make it as accessible as possible so that we can concentrate on the music, right? And the phrasing and the space between the notes. So it's a single note in each hand. There's no chords. We're always just playing a single note at any one particular point in time in each hand. And I also, in Bach's original setting, there are some eighth notes, and I got rid of them as well. So if you know the chorale, that might bother you a little bit. I don't know. I apologize. But again, trying to make it just super easy to play. And I kind of like this very sparse setting of it. So I think I'll start by just trying to play through it for you. So it's an example to me of how we don't need a lot of notes to create something beautiful, right? And just so many interesting things going on there. So let's go through this. And I should mention, by the way, that sheet music, sign up for my email newsletter and I'll send you a copy of this sheet music so you can play through it yourself. And you should be seeing a link somewhere up here. Also check the video description down below for a link there. So let's look at this piece. And first, sort of the mechanics, a couple thoughts on the mechanics. So, of course, we get this repeated section, right? Those 4 bars, and then kind of a longer 8-bar section, though that's also, in a way, chopped up into these little 2 sets of 4-bar phrases. And I've got some fingerings in here. Of course, you're welcome to use or ignore those. One of the things we're trying to do is to really let each note sustain as if we were singing. And so, for example, so we have this original connecting, right? That's pretty straightforward. In the left hand, I haven't specifically notated anything, but I think, as you saw, I just ended up using 2 on all those notes. Great. We got lots of time to get set. Here's the first interesting little spot. We could connect back. Or if we want to try to let this B ring as long as possible, so I'm still using 1. It still feels as if 1 is a nice finger to use here, but that instead of I just want to keep it as legato and sustained as possible. So that's an option. It also depends on what seems more comfortable for you. So if by coming off creates extra anxiety trying to get to that B, better to connect. And then here, for just a simple line, this is actually kind of challenging. It's much easier to do a nice connected phrase where we're not replacing on any strings, whereas here, we're going to go back on both those strings that we just played and replace on the F. So to be able to play that without hearing too much of the stoppage of those strings, because they will have to get stopped, we are replacing on them, is harder than it might appear just from looking at the music. Now, of course, you could go 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, a perfectly valid fingering. I chose to do 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3 to avoid the thumb, because in general, I think for most people, the thumb on the harp maybe has a slightly harsher sound than the fingers, or at least a slightly different sound. Again, we're doing a slightly different motion. And so by doing all fingers here, it gets me more of the sound that I want. And it's just an interesting thing to play around with, right? That on the face of it, of course, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2 would make a lot of sense, but sometimes when we have time, so if it was really fast, 2-1 is more efficient. It's faster, it's easier on the hand. But in this case, the beautiful thing about this piece is we have all the time in the world. So you might try that fingering. Replacing firmly. And I think better to replace a little earlier and have that kind of almost semi-staccato sound rather than to have a panic on that first replaced note that you're playing, to try to feel as if we have all the time in the world to set up for it, and then somehow condense that preparation time into a very short amount of time while still feeling relaxed and firmly placed. So just a little technical note there. Nothing else that really stands out. We get a similar thing on bar, let's see, second full bar of the bottom line. We could connect to that. Sorry. Or we could, same idea, use the thumb but come off so that we don't stop that F that was previously ringing. We also have fermatas, which if you haven't encountered before, it just literally in Italian means stop, and it's just a chance to often people write a little sideways wavy line, for example, to show that maybe things are getting stretched a little bit, and this is just a sign for everyone that you're going to take as much time as you want at this point until it feels ready to move forward, or until the conductor cues and we're ready to go forward. So in this case, let's see. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's maybe almost becoming a half note, right? But it's more, it should be an organic thing. It should feel, right, as if that we take a breath, right? That we finish that, we finish singing that phrase, it finishes. And then we take a breath so that even though as written, if we didn't have any indication, we might think, end of a phrase, so it's just being clear in terms of how that's phrased. So now let's look at what we're doing musically, right? How we're getting from note to note. So there's such a universe of possibilities that springs just from that very first note that we play. where are we going next? And in my mind's ear, I hear that note crescendoing, right? As if it starts from nowhere and grows boom, into the next note. And of course, on the harp, the loudest point is when we play it, and it dissipates, but we can imagine that it will grow and swell in sound, and we can maybe have some movement with a larger body movement. In this case, we're not coming off, but to try to encourage that idea. And it's amazing the effect that we can sometimes get that you think one would not be able to on an instrument where we can't sustain the sound. So a lovely little phrase, right? So boom, sense of building and easing back, and it's still hanging on. So I think if we were to write some dynamics in, there'd be a bit of a crescendo and starting to pull back. So maybe around the C or the B, we might start to pull back a little bit, and then it tapers off all the way into the softest point there. And it's kind of a similar rise and fall. And we can play around with, so you can see that both those last two Fs, I just played around with the placement a little bit, right? So that I just hinted at delaying that a little bit. And then I sat on that last one just a little bit, right? Again, we're waiting for this to sort of resolve into the end of this phrase. So just one possibility, right? And playing around with this and experimenting. And then of course we repeat. And so what are we going to do the second time through? Maybe this is a little bit softer, is often an option. Maybe we've heard this before, and now the first was a little bit intense, and now maybe it's okay, we were settled into this. And then at the moment, at least, I kind of hear this repeated phrase now as being more intense, as being more emphatic. And of course, you could look at the words if you wanted to match this chorale, but again, the tune itself it was not necessarily, did not originate with any particular words. So in this case, I haven't read the words, and I'm just looking at how the music speaks to me, right? Trusting yourself and trying to experiment. And again, it's over, but it's hanging there, right? It's hanging there. Hearing that sound sustain. Sorry. So this is kind of interesting. Here's a spot to really be aware of the left hand. We're going to have 3 C's in a row, right? With 3 different notes, with an F, with an E, and with a G. So and because there's the payoff, the left hand finally moves. We repeat the G in the right hand, and the left hand has moved, right? So a different chord, a different harmony. Right, that was a little bit too loud, that listening for the matching up the volume levels. And of course, being aware of that, just by the very nature of how it's written, when both hands are playing, that's 2 strings. So the single notes, right? We maybe have to just think about backing off a little bit on beats 1 and 3 to make sure that when we're playing 2 strings at the same time, it doesn't overpower or pop out of the context of, it should sound just as smooth as if we were going. So And to me, unlike the first 4 bars, that's a completed phrase, whereas this one here now, completed phrase, but also still leading us on. It's not resolved. Aha, right? So it's like breath. And again, here's another one where that phrase kind of resolves, but also leaves us hanging. We're waiting. And again, boom. How long do we stretch that? And again, hearing, at least in my mind's ear, this note crescendoing, this swell of yeah. So that first time I played it, it was just a little bit too loud. Again, having 2 notes and the ending. So for me, endings are so important, right? And this, it's such a beautiful ending. It's kind of like a perfect short story where you get to the end of that short story and you realize that moment of zen, that wonderful moment of realizing that everything from the beginning of the story led up to this point. All this stuff that maybe you didn't realize had significance does have significance, and just this sort of beautiful moment of the present, which you're hearing or experiencing or reading at that moment, is also rippling back and affecting what you just experienced. Very, very, very interesting effect. So this ending, right, is so important, trying to have it be just exactly the way you want it, right? And how do you want it? Well, experimenting with that, right? So maybe it's always a little bit hard because you kind of want to hear the whole piece through. That whole context will affect how you want to hear that ending. But then in terms of practice, we want to be able to kind of practice just exactly what I want to do with the ending. So again, the more that you work on it, the more you might have an idea of exactly what you want. I'm going to back up to the start of this last line. So that a little bit louder. So to me, it's almost a bit of a breath mark. Da, dee, da, da, dee, da. And having that last chord, that last beat, come precisely in a perfect spot. So not stretched too much, not just sort of boom, boom, metronomic without any sort of intention or attention paid to it. And I've talked about this before, sometimes that idea of having a note happen a split second before you expected it can be very, very effective. Sometimes we stretch, right? And sometimes we're stretching, but we stretch just a tiny bit less than maybe would be predictable. And that can be just, again, that moment of having it happen and then realizing that it's happened and realizing that it's been in a perfect spot. Right? So yeah. Something like that. And so what I would do is I would go back and listen to myself. I'd record myself. So of course, trying to do as much as you can just as you're playing and developing your ear to listen for that space between the notes and how you get from note to note and the phrasing. But then also it's so helpful to record yourself and go back and listen to that, because that can just be such a fantastic way to realize that, oh, this needs more, this needs less, this needs to be louder, this needs to be softer, this needs to be more connected. So again, just I get so excited about the possibilities in a piece like this, which very, very simple. The technical demands there are some of those repeated notes, but relatively very easy to play in terms of the fingers, except for the control and the placement, being able to get that consistent sound and volume that you want, and being able to and again, it could be different tempo, right? It could be slightly faster than I play. Notice there, we had a certain momentum, but there on that repeat, I just kind of slowed it down there. Sort of unexpected turbulence. No, just an unexpected moment of easing off a little bit, and that same as you can also have an unexpected sort of push forward, and then it just lots of possibilities, right? Lots of possibilities. So I would love to hear if you play this. I'd love to hear your experiences playing this, and or send me a video. And just a great opportunity to work on control and phrasing. And so listening for that, right, as you play, listening to recordings of yourself, and listening to other people. So my recommendation would be other piano players. Edwin Fisher, Annie Fisher, there's an American called William Capell, amazing phrasing. Some Rubinstein, and just listen how they get from note to note. Look for something that's slow, for example. Those are great, because then you have more chance. There's not all these extra notes you're trying to listen to, but just to how they get from one note to the next. So hope you've enjoyed that. Hope that's been interesting, and I will see you in a couple weeks' time. Cheers.